Everyone thinks the future of cars has already been decided. Electric vehicles are everywhere now. Governments are banning gasoline engines. Tesla became the symbol of the future. Every major automaker is rushing to build bigger batteries, faster chargers, and fully electric lineups before they get left behind. And for a while, it looked like Honda was falling behind all of them. But behind closed doors, Honda was working on something so different. Most people ignored it completely. Not a better battery, not a faster charger, something that doesn't even need charging at all. And the strange part is, Honda may have arrived at this idea because they failed first. Years ago, Honda built a car almost nobody remembers now. On paper, it looked impossible to beat. It could refuel in minutes, drive for hundreds of miles, and produce nothing but water vapor from the exhaust. No giant battery packs. No waiting hours at charging stations. No dependence on massive electrical grids, and yet the project collapsed. The public barely cared. Most companies would have buried the idea and moved on forever. Honda didn't, because internally, they believed the car itself was never the problem. The world just wasn't ready for it yet, and that belief may end up changing the entire clean car industry to understand why Honda is suddenly betting billions on hydrogen while the rest of the world chases EV. You have to go back to the beginning. Back before Honda became a global giant, before the Accord, before Formula One, before motorcycles took over the world. Back to one man covered in grease, rebuilding engines in a destroyed country. SOICHIRO Honda never acted like a typical businessman. He wasn't polished. He wasn't corporate. He was obsessed with machines. As a kid, he spent more time around tools and engines than classrooms. He loved speed, loved taking things apart just to understand how they worked, and that mindset would shape Honda forever. During World War II, his factory was bombed. Then an earthquake destroyed what was left. Most people would have quit after that. He didn't. After the war, Japan had almost no fuel, no money, and barely functioning infrastructure. People just needed a cheap way to move around, so Honda started attaching tiny engines to bicycles. That simple idea changed everything. Within a few years, Honda motorcycles exploded across Japan, then the world. But the deeper philosophy inside the company never changed. Honda became obsessed with solving problems other companies ignored. They weren't trying to follow trends. They wanted to engineer around limitations. That's why Honda kept doing things differently. When emissions laws tightened in the 1970s, many automakers panicked. Honda responded with new engine technology that met regulations without sacrificing performance. When small cars were seen as boring economy machines, Honda built engines that actually felt exciting to drive, again and again. The company survived by questioning assumptions everyone else accepted, and eventually, that same instinct led them into one of the biggest gambles in automotive history. Because while the world celebrated electric vehicles as the perfect solution, Honda quietly started noticing the cracks. At first, EVs felt revolutionary. Silent acceleration, huge touchscreens, no gasoline. Governments pushed incentives everywhere. Celebrities promoted them. Entire countries announced plans to ban gas-powered cars completely. It looked unstoppable. But underneath all the excitement, some uncomfortable problems started appearing. Batteries required massive amounts of lithium and cobalt. Mining those materials damaged ecosystems and created supply chain problems countries couldn't fully control. Charging infrastructure struggled to keep pace with adoption. Power grids started facing pressure in places with high EV usage. And for everyday drivers, one frustration never fully disappeared. Waiting to charge? Waiting in line. Waiting in line? During road trips, even fast charging still felt slower than refueling a normal car. And Honda became obsessed with that weakness, because they weren't just thinking about cars, they were thinking about systems. What happens if millions of people charge vehicles simultaneously? What happens to electrical grids during extreme weather? What happens when battery demand outpaces raw material supply? Most companies ignored those questions because EV sales were booming. Didn't. And this is where the story starts to get uncomfortable for the entire EV industry. Because while competitors were racing toward larger batteries, Honda started moving in the opposite direction, toward hydrogen At first, the idea sounded almost ridiculous. Hydrogen cars had existed for years, but they felt experimental, complicated, expensive. Infrastructure barely existed. Most people assumed the technology was dead, long before it had a chance to matter, but Honda saw something different. Hydrogen solved one specific problem. EVs still couldn't escape time. A hydrogen car could refuel almost as fast as a gasoline vehicle, minutes instead of hours. And unlike massive battery packs, hydrogen fuel cells didn't require the same quantities of rare earth materials, so Honda built the Clarity fuel cell, and technically, it worked. The car could travel hundreds of miles on a tank. It felt smooth and quiet, like an EV, but without long charging times. The only thing leaving the exhaust pipe was water vapor. On paper, it looked like the future, but reality hit hard. Hydrogen stations barely existed outside a few regions in California and Japan. Most people didn't understand the technology. EVs already dominated public attention. Governments heavily subsidized battery vehicles instead. Charging stations spread rapidly while hydrogen infrastructure moved slowly. The Clarity wasn't failing because it was bad. It was failing because the world around it wasn't ready. And eventually, Honda shut the project down publicly. To most outsiders, that looked like the end. Hydrogen lost. EVs won. Story over. But internally, Honda reached a completely different conclusion. The technology wasn't wrong. The timing was so. Instead of abandoning hydrogen, Honda disappeared quietly into development. No huge announcements, no dramatic marketing campaigns, just years of engineering behind the scenes while the EV market exploded. Then something changed. Governments started worrying about electrical infrastructure. Countries began investing in alternative clean energy systems. Hydrogen projects quietly expanded across Japan, Germany, China, and parts of the United States. Suddenly, the infrastructure problem that killed the Clarity didn't look impossible anymore, and Honda saw an opening this time. They avoided one major mistake. The Clarity felt futuristic. Too futuristic. So, Honda's next hydrogen vehicle wouldn't look like an experiment. It would look familiar, safe, normal. That vehicle became the hydrogen-powered CR-V. And this is where things started getting very interesting, because Honda stopped trying to sell people on the future. Instead, they sold convenience. The hydrogen CR-V refuels in minutes. It drives long distances without massive battery packs. And unlike the old Clarity, it's built inside one of the most recognizable SUV platforms in the world. But Honda added another twist most people missed completely. The vehicle could power homes during emergencies. Suddenly, the car wasn't just transportation anymore. It became backup energy infrastructure. And that changes the entire conversation. Honda isn't competing directly against Tesla. They're competing against the limitations of the electrical system itself. While EV companies focus on faster charging networks, Honda is asking a different question entirely. What if charging eventually becomes the bottleneck? What if the real future isn't about bigger batteries, but about reducing dependence on them altogether? That question suddenly matters a lot more than it used to, especially as countries begin splitting into completely different energy strategies. China is investing heavily in hydrogen for buses and industrial transport. Japan treats hydrogen as part of national energy security. Germany is expanding hydrogen infrastructure for long-haul trucking. Even companies that fully embraced EVs are quietly researching hydrogen again behind the scenes, not because EVs failed, but because one solution may not solve everything, and Honda understands that better than most. They're not trying to kill electric cars. They're preparing for the moment electric cars stop being enough. That's the real reason this story matters, because Honda may have realized something early that the rest of the industry is only starting to admit now. The future of transportation was never going to depend on one technology alone. And if that's true, then Honda's biggest advantage wasn't being first. It was surviving long enough to wait for the world to catch up, which leaves one question nobody can answer yet. Did Honda fall behind the future? Or did they simply choose a different one first?